A 10-year-old boy gave his inhaler to a man at the park unaware his a billionaire. 24 hours later he changed his life forever. It was a crisp afternoon in the city park when Mr. Goerge, a powerful businessman, came to relax after sealing a massive deal. The weight of the day melted away in the fresh air until he suddenly felt his chest tighten. His asthma, he had forgotten his inhaler. Struggling to breathe, he clutched his chest. Panic creeping in, he stumbled toward a bench and sank onto it, his hands trembling, gasping for air. The sharp pangs of panic grew with each second. His vision blurred. Around him the world carried on. Joggers ran past. A couple walked their dog. A man fed birds. No one noticed, no one stopped, and he couldn't call out. His breath was too shallow. That's when Tommy, a kind-hearted boy playing nearby, noticed his soccer ball had rolled a little too far off the path, and as he chased it he glanced toward the bench and caught sight of the man in distress. Tommy stopped, blinked, and within a heartbeat sprinted over. There was no hesitation in his stride, no second thought. He ran straight to Mr. Goerge, alarm flashing in his young eyes. "Sir, are you okay?" Tommy asked, his voice filled with concern. Mr. Goerge opened his mouth, but only a whisper of air escaped. He gripped the side of the bench tightly, eyes pleading. Tommy reached into his jacket pocket, quickly pulling out his own inhaler. "Here, use mine," he said, and placed it in Mr. Goerge's hand with weak shaking fingers. Mr. Goerge brought the inhaler to his mouth and took a deep puff. He held the breath, then slowly exhaled again. He inhaled, and just like that the world stopped spinning. Air returned to his lungs. The panic began to ease. His chest still HDHD, but his mind was clearer now. He looked at the boy in disbelief, still catching his breath. "You just saved me." He managed to say the words grally but sincere. Tommy smiled. "My mom always says we should help people when we can." Moments later, a woman in a diner uniform came hurrying down the path, wiping her hands on her apron, eyes scanning for her son. That was Sarah, Tommy's mother. She just finished her shift at the local diner and had come to walk Tommy home when she spotted her son with a stranger. Her steps quickened. "Tommy, everything all right?" she called, already moving toward them. Her eyes flicked to the man on the bench, then to the inhaler in his hand. Tommy nodded. He couldn't breathe. "I gave him mine." Mr. Goerge stood steadier now. Though still a bit pale, he tucked the inhaler into his coat pocket like it was something sacred. Your son helped me when no one else did. He's got a heart of gold." Sarah looked down at Tommy, then back at the man. She gave a polite, weary smile. "I'm just glad he was there." Mr. Goerge reached into his wallet and pulled out a sleek business card. The gold-embossed lettering glinted in the sunlight. "I'm Goerge Langston," he said. "I'd really appreciate staying in touch. You both have given me more than you realize." Sarah hesitated for just a moment, then took the card. "Thank you," she said quietly, unsure of what else to offer. Goerge nodded, his eyes lingering on Tommy with something like wonder before he turned and walked away, heading toward his car. He'd be going to the hospital just to be safe, but he was already thinking about that boy who had changed something in him that night. Tommy recounted everything over a modest dinner of leftovers and toast. He was all excitement, waving his hands, reliving each second of the story. Sarah listened, smiling as she ran a thumb over the business card still resting on the table. Goerge Holdings, it read. She'd heard the name before on the news in passing. Conversations at the diner sometimes mentioned in the business section of the newspaper. He was one of the wealthiest men in the city. The phone rang. Sarah answered cautiously. "Hello, good evening. This is Marcus Langston. I hope I'm not calling too late." His voice was warmer than before, still with a deep commanding tone, but softened now. "No, it's all right," she replied, glancing at Tommy, who was already leaning forward, curious. "I just wanted to thank your son again. Really, I can't stop thinking about it. I'm glad he could help," she said. "That's just who he is." "I was hoping," Goerge continued, "that you might both come to my home tomorrow. I'd like to speak with you properly." Sarah hesitated. It sounded formal, almost surreal, but something in his voice was genuine. "All right, we'll come." Scene the next morning arrived with a quiet stillness in the air, the kind that only visits when something unusual, something important is about to happen. Sunlight crept through the modest blinds of a small apartment where Sarah stood in front of the mirror, adjusting the collar of her only good blouse. Her hands trembled slightly, not from fear but uncertainty. In the reflection, Tommy, her 10-year-old son, stood at the doorway of her bedroom, dressed in his neatest clothes, hair slicked to the side with effort and pride. There was a nervous energy in the room, the same kind that settles before the start of a new Chapter Do I look okay, Mom? Tommy asked, tugging at the sleeves of his jacket. Sarah turned and smiled. You look perfect. He smiled back, that kind of unfiltered, innocent grin that only children possess. The kind that could break through hardened hearts. It was still surreal. The events of the day before, a normal afternoon in the park, an act of kindness, and a stranger in need. Only the stranger wasn't ordinary. He was Goerge Langston, one of the most powerful businessmen in the city, and today they were invited to his home. A sleek black car pulled up outside their building right on time. Tommy's eyes widened as he stepped outside. He had seen cars like this only in movies. The driver stepped out, tipped his hat, and opened the door. Sarah hesitated, holding Tommy's hand a little tighter. This was not her world. The polished leather seats, the scent of cologne and cedar, the silence that hung like velvet. Still she climbed in, heart thooting like a drum. The drive through the city felt dreamlike. The concrete buildings began to thin, replaced by open spaces and manicured lawns. Then came the iron gates, tall, black and ornate, guarding an estate that looked more like a palace than a house. As the gates opened and the car turned up a winding driveway, Sarah and Tommy stared out at the sprawling grounds, fountains, statues, rows of roses that stretched like red ribbons across the lawn. The house itself rose up with quiet grandeur, framed by marble pillars and tall glass windows that shimmered in the morning light. The car came to a soft stop. The front door opened before they even reached it, and there he was, Mr. Goerge, no longer the man gasping for breath on a park bench, but a poised and smiling host dressed in a crisp light sweater and tailored trousers. He looked nothing like the powerful executive Sarah had imagined. He looked like someone simply happy to see them. Welcome, Goerge said, stepping forward. It's so good to see you again. Tommy smiled shyly and waved. Sarah nodded, her voice caught somewhere between awe and uncertainty. Come in. Come in, Goerge said, ushering them inside. The interior of the house was stunning. A grand staircase swept up toward a vat ceiling with a chandelier that sparkled like a sky of stars. The floors were marble, the walls lined with paintings that looked older than any book Sarah had ever owned. But despite its grandeur, there was something warm about the home. It didn't feel cold or pretentious. It felt peaceful. He led them into a sitting room filled with soft, cream-colored furniture and sunlight pouring in through towering windows. A fireplace crackled gently at one end of the room, and the scent of fresh flowers filled the air. Please sit, Goerge offered, gesturing to the couch. Sarah sat stiffly, at first careful not to touch anything. Tommy sank into the cushion beside her, eyes wide with wonder, quietly taking in everything. I wanted to invite you both here, Goerge began, his voice steady but gentle, because what happened yesterday wasn't just an emergency to me. It was a moment that changed something. Sarah tilted her head, listening. I've spent most of my life in offices and conference rooms. I've worked 12-hour days since I was your son's age, and I've won things, contracts, awards, recognition. But all of that, none of that compares to the moment I realized a small boy with nothing to gain would run up to a stranger in need and hand him something that could have saved his life. He looked at Tommy now, his eyes warm. You didn't ask who I was. You didn't hesitate. You just helped. That kind of kindness, it's rare, it's priceless. Tommy looked down, cheeks coloring. So Goerge continued, turning to Sarah. Now, I thought a lot last night, and I realized I don't want this to end with a thank you. I want to do something for you, for both of you. Sarah sat up straighter, her fingers clutched at the hem of her blouse. Goerge reached for a folder on the table, opened it slowly, and slid a few documents toward her. This is a transfer of funds, $2 million. It will be deposited into a secure trust under your name. No strings, no expectations, a gift. Sarah froze, her breath caught in her throat. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. It was as if her mind refused to catch up with her moment. $2 million, she echoed softly, and Goerge added, I've also selected 3 homes across the city. You can choose any of them. They are fully paid for, move-in ready, no more rent, no more worries about leaking ceilings or broken heaters. Sarah shook her head, almost dazed. Mr. Langston, we can't accept this. It's too much. No, Marcus said, smiling gently. It's exactly enough, because your son gave me something I didn't even know I was missing. That moment in the park, it changed me. He reminded me that people matter more than profit, that small actions have enormous power, and I want to return that gift. Sarah's eyes brimmed with tears. She reached for Tommy's hand. We've never had this kind of help before, she whispered. That's exactly why you deserve it, he said. There was silence in the room, but it wasn't awkward. It was sacred. Tommy looked up at his mother, Mom, we could have our own house and you wouldn't have to work so much. Sarah nodded, eyes full now she looked at Goerge, voice trembling. Thank you truly. I don't even know how to say it. You already did, Goerge replied the moment you raised a boy who would give his only inhaler to a stranger. The rest of the morning unfolded in warmth. Goerge gave them a tour of the estate, showed Tommy his library full of books and maps and stories. He told them about the homes they could choose from, each with yards and kitchens and space to breathe. When it was time to leave, Goerge stood at the door, hands in his pockets. This isn't a goodbye, he said. It's just the beginning. Tommy gave him a hug, quick and clumsy but sincere. Goerge chuckled and ruffled his hair back in the car as they pulled away from the estate. Sarah held the folder on her lap like it was a miracle. Tommy leaned against her shoulder, tired but glowing. The world outside looked different now, not because it had changed, but because they had. The wind carried a soft sin of spring through the open windows, rustling the sheer white curtains of the new house as if the walls themselves were breathing with relief. Outside, sunlight painted everything in soft amber, the trimmed grass, the freshly planted flower beds, the quiet sidewalk where neighbors walked by with dogs and easy smiles. Inside, Sarah stood in the middle of the kitchen, still, her hands wrapped around a warm cup of tea. The hum of a new refrigerator played softly in the background. It was quiet, not the kind of quiet born of emptiness, but the kind that came with peace. Weeks had passed since she and Tommy left behind their cramped apartment with its flickering bathroom light and heating that coughed more than it worked. This house felt different. The light reached every corner. The walls were thick enough to hold in laughter and dreams, but not so thick to shut the world out. It was theirs all. There's Tommy came sprinting down the stairs, socked feet sliding slightly on the polished wood. Mom, he called, excitement bouncing in his voice. The movers put up my poster, the one with the spaceship. His eyes gleamed as if he had just placed a personal flag on the moon. Sarah smiled, setting her cup down. That's great, sweetheart. Want to show me? He took her hand without waiting for an answer and pulled her upstairs. His room was filled with sunlight and newness. A wide window looked out onto the backyard where a small tire swing already hung from a low oak branch. On the wall above his bed was the poster in question, a sleek rocket ship blasting off into the stars. I put it up so I can see it when I wake up, Tommy said proudly. It reminds me that I can go anywhere. Sarah blinked quickly, her throat tightening. It had only been a few weeks, but it already felt like the life they had come from. The long shifts at the diner, the worry over rent, the patched clothes and second-hand school supplies belonged to someone else, someone far behind them. They went downstairs again, where boxes were still stacked in corners and picture frames leaned patiently against walls, waiting to be hung. But already the house was becoming a home. The sin of vanilla candles mingled with fresh paint and the promise of dinners cooked without exhaustion. Sarah wandered into the room that was now her office. For years she had scribbled grocery lists and recipes, and margins of old notebooks hunched at the kitchen counter between bills and time carts. Now a real desk sat near a window, books neatly stacked beside a sleek laptop. She had enrolled in online classes, studying nutrition with a plan to one day start her own wellness cafe. Dream she had tucked away long ago, almost embarrassed by its fragility, but now the dream felt solid, like the foundation beneath her feet. That afternoon, as the sun tilted westward and the shadows stretched long and lazy across the floor, the doorbell rang. Tommy got there first. A small envelope lay on the welcome mat, no stamp, no return address, just his mother's name in elegant handwriting. Sarah opened it slowly. Inside was a single sheet of fine paper, thick and smooth, with a message written in ink that looked almost handwritten. Kindness always finds its way back. Stay true to yourself, Mr. Goerge. Beneath it was another sheet, a legal document. Her eyes skimmed the words, but the meaning struck her instantly. It was a scholarship for Tommy, full tuition, any school, any dream, any place he chose to go. Sarah's hands trembled. She sat down, the letter in her lap. Tommy looked at her curiously. What does it say? She turned to him, tears slipping quietly down her cheeks. It says your future is already waiting for you. You just have to go chase it. He smiled, not quite understanding the weight of it all, but happy to see you're happy. That evening they cooked dinner together, not out of necessity but for joy. They made tomato basil pasta, laughing as Tommy accidentally flung a noodle at the backsplash. The table was set with care. The chairs, even the napkins folded. Sarah poured herself a glass of wine, something she hadn't done in years, and they sat down, the soft clink of cutlery mingling with the sound of wind outside. I like it here, Tommy said as he twirled spaghetti. I don't miss the old place. Sarah reached over and squeezed his hand. Me neither. Later, as night slipped in and the stars peeked through the curtains, Sarah stood by the window with the letter in her hand. She thought about Goerge Langston, not as the billionaire everyone whispered about in boardrooms and magazines, but as the man on the bench gasping for breath, a man who had been humbled not by circumstance but by a boy's selfless act, and he had remembered not just with words but with action. She folded the letter neatly and placed it in the top drawer of her desk beside her coarse material. Something about the act felt ceremonial, like laying the first brick of a new life. Days turned into weeks, and the rhythm of their new world settled in. Tommy made friends in the neighborhood. Sarah cooked more than she ordered, in the sound of laughter in their home became common. Occasionally a note would arrive, always from Goerge, always brief. Sometimes it was just a quote or a reminder to keep dreaming. He never visited unannounced, never intruded, but his presence lingered like a good scent in a favorite room. One Saturday morning, as Sarah tended to her garden, a new passion that involved more trial and error than skill, Tommy ran outside holding a brochure. Mom, look, it's a summer space camp, real astronauts come. He was breathless, hopeful. Sarah took the brochure and smiled. Then we'll sign you up, and they did, easily, without calculating what it would cost, without guilt. It was the first time in her life she had said yes without hesitation. Tommy returned from that camp different, older, wiser, filled with questions about the stars' propulsion systems and what it felt like to float. His mind burned with possibilities, and Sarah saw it, that spark. She recognized it because she had once had it too. They began to dream out loud. Sarah would open her cafe one day, maybe call it the Hearth, where food wasn't just served but felt nourishing, comforting home. Tommy started keeping a journal of invention, ideas, and future plans. Some were simple, others wildly imaginative, but all of them were anchored in belief. Sometimes when Sarah would sit in the quiet after Tommy had gone to bed, she'd think of how close they had come to never having this, how easily that day in the park could have gone unnoticed. A boy, a man, and a breath of how delicate the thread was that had connected them, and how strong it had become. She knew Goerge had done more than offer them a new life. He had believed in their worth without needing proof. He had seen value not in rums or income but in character. That kind of faith had changed everything. Years would pass. Tommy would grow taller than her. His voice would deepen. The house would gain more photos on the walls, more memories etched into the floors and the spaces between holidays. Sarah's cafe would open small at first, then steady, then loved by locals, and the letter, the one with that simple message, would remain in the drawer, a reminder of where it all began, because kindness, when given freely, never fades. It plants roots, it grows in silence, and it blossoms where it's least expected, and when it returns tenfold. Tommy once asked her late one night under the stars, do you think that one day I'll be able to do something like that for someone else? She looked at him, silhouetted by moonlight, a boy with a heart too big for the world to ignore. You already have, she whispered, but yes, one day you'll do even more. And he would, because the story hadn't ended with the house or the scholarship or the letter. It was just beginning. Tommy didn't start volunteering because someone told him to. He did it because something inside him shifted that day in the park, and it never shifted back the moment he handed his inhaler to a gasping stranger. Just a simple instinctive act. He hadn't known it would lead to a beautiful home, a scholarship, and more importantly, a new kind of life. But even now, as their home grew warmer with memories and Sarah's cafe opened its doors to locals seeking good food and good company, Tommy never forgot that his kindness had once changed the direction of their lives, and now he wanted to see where kindness might lead others. The shelter was only a few blocks from their new home. It sat at the edge of a quieter part of town where traffic seemed to slow down out of respect, and the buildings bore the wear of time. The sign out front, slightly faded but still legible, read Willow Grove Community Center. Inside, the scent of soap, warm bread, and old wood mixed in a strangely comforting way. The shelter served as a halfway point for those looking for a new start. Meals, temporary beds, even job counseling. Tommy's first day was quiet. He helped stack canned goods, handed out fresh towels, and served food during the midday rush. Some people didn't look up, others smiled with tired eyes, and then there were those who told Stories, fragments of broken timelines. Regrets and dreams. Sarah joined him a few days later on her day off from the cafe. It was her idea to bring soup from scratch, her famous sweet potato stew that had become a local favorite. Tommy watched as his mother worked the room, chatting with the guests like old friends. The space came alive around her. Like her food knew how to reach people in ways words couldn't. Helping people feels good, Tommy said with a grin as he dried trays at the back table. Sarah nodded, glancing over at him. It's funny, she said, how simple it is once you start, and how hard it is to stop. They became regulars at the shelter, not every day, not every hour, but often enough that they became known by name. Tommy helped with homework for kids whose families were in transition. He started reading aloud in the corner once a week, stories about courage, space exploration, and the power of tiny decisions. Sometimes he brought his telescope and set it up in the lot behind the building. He showed wide-eyed kids the moon and Jupiter's moons and told them that the sky belonged to all of them, no matter where they slept. Word got around, and one afternoon, as Tommy and Sarah were unpacking a donation box, a familiar black car pulled up outside. Tommy didn't notice it at first. He was too focused on untangling cords for the shelter's beat up speakers, but Sarah saw the car. She knew it before the door even opened. Mr. Goerge stepped out, dressed in a dark blazer, no tie, the same quiet presence he always carried like a second skin. He entered the shelter not as a guest of honor, but as a man who understood humility. Tommy turned and broke into a wide smile. Mr. Goerge. They shook hands firmly, and Goerge took a moment to scan the space, the laughter, the food, the ease in which Tommy moved around the guests, like he belonged there, like he was part of the place's rhythm. You've got a big heart, Tommy, Goerge said, his voice a little softer than usual. I see now that what happened that day in the park wasn't just a lucky moment for me. It was the beginning of who you were always going to be. Tommy didn't know what to say, so he just smiled. But later, when the shelter had quieted down and the last of the dinner trays were rinsed and stacked, he found himself sitting beside Goerge on the bench out front beneath the pale yellow glow of a flickering street lamp. Do you ever think about what would have happened if I hadn't been there that day? Tommy asked. Goerge looked ahead, thoughtful. Sometimes, but mostly, I think about how it's not really about what did happen, it's about what you chose to do after it. I guess, Tommy said, I just feel like I was lucky to help, and now I want to make sure other people get lucky too. That's not luck, Goerge replied. That's legacy. Years moved on the way they always do, slow and fast at once. The shelter continued to thrive with help from the community. Sarah's cafe grew, and she started offering free cooking classes on weekends for single parents. Tommy entered high school with a quiet confidence, the kind that came from having been shaped by gratitude and grounded in purpose. He kept volunteering, not because he had to, but because it remained the most honest part of his week. When he wasn't studying or helping at the cafe, he mentored younger kids who had trouble finding their place. He tutored them, helped them build confidence, and even introduced a few of them to the stars with his telescope, the same telescope Mr. Goerge had gifted him 2 birthdays ago. By the time he graduated, Tommy had earned a full scholarship on top of the one Marcus had set aside. Universities competed for him, not just because of his grades, but because of who he was. He chose a school known for its astrophysics program. It was far from home, but his dreams had always looked up. Before he left for college, Goerge invited him to dinner. It was a quiet meal, just the two of them at Goerge's estate, the same house where years before Goerge had offered them the kind of gift that couldn't be repaid. Over grilled salmon and roasted vegetables, Goerge said, I have no doubt you'll go on to do incredible things, but remember this, Tommy, your greatness doesn't depend on how far you go, it depends on how many hands you reach for along the way. Tommy nodded his eyes. Mister, you changed my life, he said quietly. No, Goerge replied, placing a hand on his shoulder. You changed mine. College life brought new challenges, but Tommy stayed grounded. He studied hard, made friends, and worked late nights in labs under domes of glass where telescopes reached into space. But he also founded a campus group focused on community outreach, students tutoring kids, collecting supplies, setting up STEM days at local schools. He had learned long ago that being brilliant wasn't enough. You had to bring people with you back home. Sarah ran the cafe with the same love she had always poured into her cooking. On the walls were hand-painted quotes, and next to the register hung a framed note that read, kindness always finds its way back, Mr. Goerge. It had become the Cafe's motto years later long after. College Tommy returned to the city this time not as a child but as a grown man a scientist a dreamer still he'd taken a job with a private space exploration firm and his work was helping shape the way humanity looked at the stars but one rainy afternoon while walking back from a meeting he turned a corner and saw someone slumped on a bench older maybe 60 coughing into his coat pale hands shaking there was no hesitation Tommy approached sir are you all right the man looked up startled wheezing asthma he managed to say forgot my inhaler. Tommy reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a spare something he always carried just in case here, he said, gently placing it into the man's hand. The man took 2 deep breaths closed his eyes then exhaled thank you, he whispered you didn't have to. No, Tommy said smiling gently but I wanted to. He waited with the man until help arrived and as he walked away, heart's steady shoulders lifted he knew something had come full circle not because he expected a reward or recognition but because in that moment, the world had offered him a chance to give back what he'd once received a breath a break a beginning he visited Mr. Goerge the following week the man was older now his hair silvering his steps a little slower but his eyes still held the same spark. I helped someone, Tommy said after recounting the story. Goerge smiled, then you've done more than I ever could. They sat together for a while in silence watching the garden sway in the afternoon breeze. Tommy looked toward the sky where soft clouds drifted like ships. You were right, he said at last about what? One act of kindness it really can change a life. Goerge nodded his voice. Barely above a whisper it changed mine. And that Tommy knew was the legacy they'd built together not carved in stone or announced on stages but in moments quiet simple powerful the kind that ripple outward farther than anyone can measure the kind that last forever. If you enjoyed this story about Tommy, Sarah and Mr. Goerge we'd love for you to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more heartwarming, inspiring stories just like this one. What did you think about how it all unfolded from the moment Tommy helped Mr. Goerge in the park to the life-changing invitation and finally seeing Tommy pay it forward as an adult? How did it make you feel? Do you believe one act of kindness can truly change the world? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below sharing what stood out to you the most and how the ending made you feel, and don't forget rate the story on a scale of 1 to 10. Be honest, we're here to grow and bring you the best content. We can also tell us where you're watching from. We have a beautiful global community and would love to know where this story is reaching. Your support means everything. More stories are coming your way soon, real, emotional and unforgettable. See you in the next one.